the record button. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Fisher. It's September 3rd, 2025, and we're back for another season of the Pacific Northwest Railroad Archive, Cascade Rail Foundation annual programming, I guess I would say. We've got an excellent program this year. If you're new to our program, I'd like to attend a future event. Drop your contact information into the chat, and I will add you to our mailing list for future programs. Just a quick note, we'll be recording Scott's program today and sharing that on YouTube. I'll be giving Scott the link for that this afternoon after we get it up online. Just a quick note about future programming. Trent Stetz, who's in the audience, there's Trent, will be doing a program right on an overview of Hawaiian railroads. Is that correct?
Nope, just the Big Island, just the Big Island.
Just the Big Island.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me make a note of that. October 1st, another dear friend in the audience, Elrond Lawrence, will be with us, also from CRPA. And Elrond, you'll be talking about the electrification of Californian railroads. Does that sound right?
Yeah, well, specifically the San Francisco Peninsula and Caltrain's
Oh,
changeover to electrification,
fantastic. It's going to be a
but with some
great
cool old
show.
stuff too.
Okay. October 15th, Gordon Glattenberg, Central American Steam South of the Borders, plural. October 29th, Margaret Weatherby, Head of Collections for Washington State Historical Society. So we'll find out what the big folks are doing. Another friend in the audience today, Bob St. John, will be with us on November 12th as we've got to always have a visit to the Blue Mountains. November 26th, George Hardy will be back with us. George's programs are very popular, and this time it will be on switching in Seattle at Stacy Street Yard. Say that fast 5 times. And December 10th, Robert W. Scott, my dear friend from Rochester, Washington. Robert will be with us with Jim Abney, and we will be talking about railroading on the SP&S. So with that in mind, thanks everybody for being here. And I would like to turn this over to our guest, because you didn't come to see me, Scott Lothes of the Center for Railroad Photography and Art. Scott, take it away.
Oh, Jonathan, thanks so much. And thanks everyone for tuning in today. I see several friendly faces in the audience. From the center's staff and board, Elron Lawrence is here, Heather Sontag. Let's see, at least two of our board members, Jeff Browse and Bond French. Some railroad photography from friends from various stages in life, Jim Davis, Paul DeDalius, William Gill, Mike Sawyer. Just great to see all of you today and meet others. And I think I even see where my mom and stepdad have tuned in today. So please be nice to me since they're watching.
All right, I'm trying to figure out how to get this thing switched over to you.
Well, I haven't started my share yet, so I think let
Okay.
me go ahead and do that.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that?
And does that look
And
good
oh,
there?
that's what I need to do. There we go. All right.
And are we
Now we're
full
cooking
screen
with
now?
gas. Take it away.
Okay, very good. Well, again, thank you, Jonathan, for the nice introduction and especially for the kind invitation to share some more of my photography with you. It's always a real pleasure to do so. And we're going to look at what I consider one of the gateways into the Pacific Northwest, the Feather River Canyon. But first, though, and at Jonathan's kind invitation as well, I do want to share just a few updates from our work at the Center for Railroad Photography and Art. And as we get into my Feather River program, you'll see just how much my work at the center has been responsible for nearly all of my visits to the Feather River. Shown here is the cover of the new fall issue of Railroad Heritage, which is in the mail now for our members. We are celebrating the bicentennial of railroading this month with a journey back to where it all began in Great Britain. And that is a Victor Hand photograph on the cover. And you can see more of Victor's great black and white photography of British steam in Justin Franz's interview with Victor that's in this issue. We also feature our annual award winners in this one, along with a great story about Canadian Pacific Railway art, very close to our Pacific Northwest. And that is up there in British Columbia's Glacier National Park. A really nice look at all the great art that's been created there over the years. Our updates from our own archival work include a gallery of recent highlights from our collections, plus an introduction to bit rot. And that is a topic that should strike fear in the heart of anyone who uses digital imaging technology, whether you're making new photographs or scanning old ones. We do have some suggestions about what to do about it too. Other updates in the journal really cover most of what we've been doing, and it's been a very busy summer for us at the center. So if you get the magazine, you can look forward to this soon. If you don't, just become a member. We'll send you this copy and get you signed up for a subscription going forward. Just let me leave you, though, with a couple of notes from the center of other upcoming programming to look at. First of all, we have our own online presentation series. We do these monthly, typically on Tuesday nights. And the next one of them is next Tuesday, September 9th. That'll be at 5 p.m. Pacific time, where retired Norfolk Southern manager Dutch Tubman will share the story of England's Stockton and Darlington Railway. And that is the line whose 200th anniversary we're celebrating this month. So you might imagine its opening back in 1825 had plenty of drama, and Dutch will keep you entertained while providing some great history. This is free to anyone who wants to join. Just sign up on our website and you can tune in next Tuesday evening. And also some very late breaking news here. We have just announced the location and dates for our annual conference. Conversations 2026 is going to a new city next year, Indianapolis. It's going to be at the Indiana Historical Society's beautiful Indiana History Center. We expect this to be a change just for next year, and we're excited to try something new and different. They have a beautiful auditorium. It seats 340 people, which is about 150 more than our typical venue of Lake Forest. They have a wonderful exhibition up right now about Indiana's electric interurban railways. That will still be up next spring for the conference, and just great event space. There are also about a dozen hotels within walking distance, so if you're traveling and need a place to stay, it's easy to find one and get to the venue. Our registrations for this will open on January 2nd. We'll be adding details to our website this fall and also online on our social media channels as the conference takes shape. So you can learn more about that and everything else we're doing on our website. And you can also sign up for next week's Zoom program there. And then follow us on social media. We are at Rail Photo Art on most of the major platforms. Elrond handles those and does a great job of keeping our content out there. So that's what we're a little bit about what we've been up to at the center and what you can look forward to going forward. For all of you who are members, thank you so much for your support. If you're not a member yet, just get on the website. You can do that there. We'd love to have you as well. So without further ado, we will move on to my presentation. And the idea from this stemmed from the article I did in the March issue of Railfan and Railroad called Feather River After the Fire. And that was about exploring the Feather River Canyon in the wake of the devastating Dixie Fire of 2021, as well as the Camp Fire from 3 years earlier. We'll get to that, but really my fascination with the Feather River Canyon goes back 40 years, and I'd like to start at the beginning. First, though, I'll provide a little bit of context, although I doubt this group needs much of that. The Western Pacific Railroad laid the rails through the Feather River Canyon and opened them in 1909, but I have only ever known it as part of Union Pacific, which acquired the WP in 1982. And after UP took over the Southern Pacific in 1996, the Feather River has served as one of their two routes in and out of the Bay Area. The other is, of course, SP's Donner Pass line, just to the south of the Feather River, mostly double-tracked and 70 miles shorter, but crossing the Sierras nearly 2,000 feet higher and with much steeper grades. Now, until 2010, Donner's many tunnels and snowsheds couldn't fit double-stacked container trains, and those had to run via the canyon. But when that changed, the train operations on these two routes changed greatly. But I am getting ahead of myself here. Today, we'll be looking at the former Western Pacific lines from just east of Oroville, almost to the Nevada state line, plus a bit of the High Line going north from Keddie as far as Lake Almanor, and also the Quincy Railroad in Quincy. Mostly, though, we'll be in the Feather River Canyon, so let's look more closely at the western portion of what's highlighted here. That's the UP in yellow, BNSF in orange, and then the Quincy right there at Quincy in gray. Both this and the prior map came from the rail.guide website, and that is a great resource for railroad maps. I've also added the names of the streams that the railroad follows, and that's a key feature of the geography here. Descending from Portola to Oroville, the railroad first follows Middle Fork of Feather River, then Greenhorn Creek, Spanish Creek, East Branch of North Fork of Feather River, and finally North Fork of Feather River. And the line transitions from Middle Fork to North Fork drainage through the 7,300-foot Spring Garden Tunnel. Just west of it, hiding behind the Route 70 sign, is the Williams Loop. I've also added here the names of the sidings and their lengths, and most of them are rather short by today's standards, limiting train length to about 6,000 feet or so for fluid two-way operations. So hopefully that is enough of an introduction. Let's go back to where this all started for me. Who else remembers the Union Pacific wall calendars from the 1980s? They were about a foot wide by 2 feet tall, stapled at the top, and they had a mix of train and scenery photographs inside. A friend of my grandmother's had received the 1984 calendar, and after she finished with it, she cut out the photographs and gave them to Grandma to give to me. So I must have received them sometime the following year, 1985, when I turned 6. I was a train-loving kid growing up along the Chesapeake in Ohio and southern West Virginia, and these photographs of railroads in the West captivated me. I had no idea about the recent mergers that had just vastly expanded the UP system and so greatly altered the fabric of Western railroading. I just liked the pictures. They exposed me to more of the nation's railroads, and one of them made an especially deep impression. The January photograph featured the Feather River Canyon of Pulga, California, and this image was my introduction to it. Not the California Zephyr with Western Pacific F units, but a piggyback train with Union Pacific SD40s. I think it resonated not only because it's a stunning location in its own right, but because it also reminded me of another railroad place that was already dear to me, Hawks Nest, West Virginia, where the C&O crosses the New River, a touchstone of my childhood. I didn't know I was supposed to miss the California Zephyr, F units, or even the Western Pacific itself, because when I was 6 years old, I didn't know that any of those things had ever existed. I just know that I love this photograph. I gave it a special place in my little desk at my grandparents' house, and I'd take it out on rainy days and dream of trains and faraway places. More than 20 years later, in 2009, I was working for the Center for Railroad Photography and Art, and I interviewed Ted Benson and Tom Taylor for an article about them that we ran the following year in our journal, Railroad Heritage. They told me their stories of the Western Pacific and of their own trips to the Feather River Canyon, and I remembered that calendar photograph from my childhood. I was living in Oregon then and had already planned to take the Coast Starlight down to Winterail that year, which was still being held in Stockton, California. We opened the center's Jim Shaughnessy exhibition that same weekend at the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento with a presentation by Jim himself. That's L. Ron Lawrence at right, who's with us, Ted Benson, then Jim, Jeff Browse, who's tuning in today, the late John Gruber, our founder, and Dave Steife. Pulga and the Feather River weren't that far away, so I rented a car, and that very night I drove north. This was the first time I saw Pulga with my own eyes, 3:22 a.m. on March 16th, 2009, and I am still not sure how I found the right pullout along Highway 70 in that inky black night. There had been some rain, and the Bronco escorting this train had provided just enough light for me to get my camera focused. Here's one of those Bronco escorts during a meet at Camp Rogers Siding in the middle of the canyon. These are high rail trucks that run ahead of the trains to look for trouble in the slide-prone canyon. It was a practice the WP introduced in the 1970s with a fleet of Ford Broncos, and their name endures today with the pickup trucks. These are the twin bridges at Tobin, not as famous as Pulga, but still fascinating. And it was a busy night on the railroad with 2 eastbounds working their way up the canyon against a fleet of 5 trains coming west. Here's one of them crossing the Rock Creek Trestle as the first traces of daylight seep into the heavy sky. I stayed up all night, chasing those trains up and down the canyon. There was one more westbound that morning, and then a 5-hour lull when I could finally get some sleep in my rental car. That ended with a BNSF train coming off the High Line at Ketty that afternoon, with my first time to that iconic location. And I chased this train all the way back down to Polga and was delighted to find another BNSF train coming back up the canyon at dusk, seen here between the clouds at Poe, shining its lights through the fog. I chased this train all the way back to Ketty, where I capped off the day with a sequence of images from the top of Tunnel 31 as a diverging clear signal guided first the Bronco and then the train into Tunnel 32 after another night had descended on the Sierras. I spent 3 more days in the canyon, and the railroad was busy the whole time. Every Monday through Friday, UP sent 4 stacked trains east out of the port of Oakland, and they all came chugging up the canyon like clockwork the following day. This is one of them at Rock Creek. Now, the westbounds were less predictable, but there were just as many of them. This one is entering Tunnel 14 across from the Elephant Butte and Grizzly Dome highway tunnels. BNSF typically ran 2 mixed freights each way every day on and off the High Line. They could show up at any time. This one made a timely appearance at the Honeymoon Tunnels in some nice afternoon light. And then rounding out the traffic was a single pair of Union Pacific freights. They often ran at night, but this one came west through the Honeymoon Tunnels one afternoon, although sadly with that tagged meter. I took a lot of roadside shots and also looked for opportunities to hike when I could. This was the result of my biggest hiking effort, a gut-wrenching climb up the canyon wall across from Tunnel 25 near Rich Bar one afternoon where a stack train rolls west. And this spot has become one of my favorites in the canyon. Here's a train coming east there in the absolute last light of another day. The river here makes a hard bend to the west, and the canyon opens into Rich Bar, where the setting sun can throw a spotlight onto this rugged ledge of serpentine rock. Rich Bar, incidentally, was once the home of Louise Clapp, also known as Dame Shirley, who wrote a series of letters about frontier life here in the gold rush years of 1851 and 52. They are fascinating reading if you're interested in this part of the world. Ironically, I didn't take the classic shot at Polga that had captivated me for so many years. This is the closest I came, but this BNSF train ran too early for afternoon sidelights, so I opted for more of a head-on view. The timing was about perfect for this UP stack train 2 hours later, but I took an ultra-wide shot looking down the canyon. With age, I've realized that sometimes I've maybe tried a little too hard to do something different just for the sake of it. But there have been times when that quest has had rewards, like this view of a BNSF train exiting Tunnel 32 on a foggy morning at Ketty, framed by the dangling wires of this now long-gone pole. I think my best shots from that first trip to the canyon are the night shots. This is an eastbound at Rock Creek on a clear night underneath those dazzling stars. And here's that same train a little over an hour later, emerging from Tunnel 31 at Ketty at 11 p.m. On the last night of that trip, I went back to where it had started, carefully making my way down to river level at Polga, first for this westbound rolling down the canyon, and then the finale, the shot I had really wanted, eastbound shining its lights on the bridges. I left feeling both satisfied and captivated. The next day, I rode Amtrak down the San Joaquin Valley to meet up with Maureen and her mother, who had recently moved to San Diego, and I was already thinking about when I could return to the Feather River. I made a brief visit that fall, somewhat unexpectedly. I was shooting the RailX train for Paul Dedalius, who's here today, and he presented last year about his company, Frontier Rail, who at the time had the contract to load and unload these trains. This one had just started running out of Delano, California, normally going over Donner. For some reason, it ran up the canyon this day. A little too early for sunlight in most spots, but this one at Rich Bar worked out pretty well. I stuck around to see what else I could see. Another friend, Mike Johannesson, had told me about this spot above Camp Rogers, where you could look down on 4 S-curves. I somehow managed to get my Toyota Corolla close enough to walk out to this vantage point, where I caught a UP stack train coming down and then a BNSF mixed freight going up. And here's a posterity shot of the entire scene from up there. Quite a view. I spent the night and had some good luck the next morning, including another westward stack train coming down the canyon, seen here at Rock Creek. and then its DPU at Polga, back at the river level spot where I'd taken night shots in the spring. The early October sunlight was great, but I kind of missed the mood of March and the Bronco escorts. And besides, I had to get back to Donner for the next RailX train and ultimately home to Oregon. The next year, UP finished that project to improve clearances on Donner Pass, and the maturation of distributed power technology had tamed its steeper grades. So all of those stack trains left the canyon in favor of Donner's 70-mile shorter route. I felt like I'd been just in time to catch the canyon as a busy main line, and I focused my photography efforts elsewhere. In 2012, though, I had another chance to see the canyon. I had moved to Wisconsin the prior year to start working full-time at the center, and once again, on the Sunday after Winterail, we opened an exhibition at the California State Railroad Museum. This one featured Joel Jensen's steam photography. Joel gave a presentation in the auditorium, followed by a book signing, and that's Ted Benson at right. This is Shirley Berman and Paul Hammond. Paul was then the director of the museum. He's now at Colorado and still a good friend and partner. And here's Joel with a few of his admirers. That's Mel Patrick, Mike Danneman, and Tom Taylor in the stands. The next day, I gave John Gruber a ride up Donner Pass to Lake Tahoe, where his wife Bonnie was skiing for spring break. We shot Amtrak each way, along with that stack train I showed you earlier. But Donner in the old snow of spring just wasn't very appealing to me. So even without the prospect for many trains, I wanted to see the canyon again. After dropping off John that afternoon, I drove north. And I arrived at Ketty just in time to catch an empty BNSF unit train heading onto the High Line. I spent the night in Quincy and had only the following day before I needed to fly back to Wisconsin. I wasn't expecting much, but this ended up being a day for the ages. March 13th, 2012 started before dawn with a drive to Portola, where I picked up a grain train heading west. Here it is an hour later at Ketty. By now, I knew it had to meet an eastbound down the canyon at Belden. So I waited at Tunnel 25 to see what might emerge from the steady drizzle. It turned out to be the Canyon Flyer local freight with a pair of recently rebuilt SD-40s and a long string of military equipment. I chased it as far as Ketty, where I shot this sequence with its Bronco, the power, and the military flats. This was a great train, and I was sad to let it go, but traffic and my geographic preferences compelled me back west. To catch this BNSF train that was following the local, this is it coming east at the Honeymoon Tunnels, where the spring rains were making torrents down the canyon walls. BNSF took the siding at Virgilia to meet two west. First, this vehicle train, and then a mixed freight. It was noon by now, and this made my fifth train of the day, already more than I'd expected to see. After the meets, I had time for one more shot of the BNSF train, seen here climbing up the grade on the High Line, and then I returned to Ketty, where the dispatcher was already setting up a Bronco escort for not one, but two stack trains heading down the canyon, one right after the other. This is the first at the Y, and here's the second, shot from an opening inside the Elephant Butte Highway Tunnel, where the rain had made another waterfall. I chased those trains as far as Polga, where I let them go and finally had a chance to cool my heels. That was the first break in the action since I'd left the motel in Quincy that morning 9 hours earlier. But there was still more to come, as another BNSF train came grinding up the canyon a couple of hours later, passing more waterfalls at Polga and pulling into the siding. That could only mean there was a meet coming, and so I raced back up the canyon to Rock Creek, just in time to catch my 9th train of the day, another UP mixed freight west, this one behind a pair of SD-90s, some of my favorite modern power. Their dusk meet with the BNSF train at Polga provided a rare chance to catch a Bronco and the train it was escorting in the same photograph, and I love this shot for all it says about modern operations in the canyon. I let the UP freight disappear into the dusk and followed it into the valley, where I found dinner and warmth at an Italian restaurant in Oroville and pondered my incredible luck. I would learn later from Dick Dorn that track work on Donner was responsible for the flood of trains down the canyon. This was such an unexpectedly good day that even with all the rain, it remains one of my all-time favorites. Would be 10 years before I made it back to the Feather River, though. I never planned to stay away for that long, but like a bristlecone pine in the Sierras, life's ever-twisting path took me in other directions. I only attended 2 more Winterails in Stockton, and I didn't have much time for photography on either of those. After that, Winterail moved north to Oregon, and then the pandemic canceled it and almost everything else for 2 years. But the Feather River never quite left me alone. This incredible book came out in 2014 with 2 pictures of Feather River country on its cover and many more inside. The following year, in 2015, we invited its authors to present at the Center's annual Conversations Conference. That's Dale, Dick, Ted, and Dave, right after their show, where I got to hear straight from them about the Feather River Canyon and its final decade of Western Pacific operation. Other photographers had gone to see that too, and as we expanded our collections at the center, I got to see more of their work. Among them, Victor Hand visited the canyon 4 times in those years leading up to the Union Pacific takeover. While he mostly shot black and white film in his 4x5 speed graphic cameras, there are a few color shots, including this one of a westward WP freight at Polga in 1971. Later that same afternoon, he chased a train bound for the High Line heading up the canyon, and its 6-unit lash-up included 4 F units. He spent the following afternoon at Ketty, where he caught 4 trains, starting with this one. This is BN 138 heading up the High Line behind U-30Bs that were just 2 or 3 years old at the time. And then a pair of trains west followed in short order, led by mail train WMX behind Western Pacific GP35s. And then one right behind it, and I'm envious at how open the angles at Ketty were back then before the trees grew so high. Victor caught 1 more train that day, and it was a good one. The local going up the High Line with 3 F units and several maintenance of way cars on the head end. This is Clear Creek Trestle, just north of Ketty. And here it is a little bit further up the High Line, climbing the 1.5% grade up Spanish Creek toward Crescent Mills. Victor chased this train another 20 miles to Almanor, where he caught it passing the water tank as the evening shadows grew long. His next visit was 5 years later in 1976, by which time Perlman Green covered most WP locomotives. This train is the TOF, making its typical morning run up the canyon, seen here in a backside view at Polga that's no longer possible due to tree growth. 5 years later, Victor returned again, this time chasing BN 138 east up the canyon, starting in Oroville. This is the bridge over the North Fork, just above the diversion dam. Dale Sanders gave a great presentation about the railroad efforts and the construction of the Oroville Dam project. These last 2 shots by Victor are from January of 1983, technically just after the Union Pacific merger, but the winter light is so good that I couldn't help but include them. This is a piggyback train coming west at Reno Junction, where the branch line to Reno diverges to the south. And finally, a work train coming east over the Clio Trestle in the late afternoon light. This is about 7 miles west of Portola. So even during my decade away from Feather River country, there were reminders of it, powerful reminders. These are just a very few of the workplace hazards that I am exposed to on a regular basis at the center. So by 2022, the world was opening up again. I was itching to hit the road and planning a big trip, not only to present at Winterail in Oregon, but also to see center members and donors in California. A detour to the Feather River for a couple of days would be pretty easy, but I wasn't sure whether I should go. The previous summer, one of the biggest wildfires in California history, the Dixie Fire, had ravaged the canyon while burning nearly 1 million acres. The fire had covered most of the Feather River Canyon as well as much of the BNSF High Line. The town of Greenville, 15 miles north of Ketty, had been almost completely obliterated, and I wondered whether I'd still find anything worth photographing. I mentioned this to friend and colleague Justin Franz, who covered a number of wildfires back when he was a newspaper reporter in Montana. His response was encouraging. Justin said, "As one wildland firefighter told me once, it doesn't all burn. The fire really crawls through the landscape and creates a unique mosaic. The spring after a big wildfire can be really interesting and unique, with new life and vegetation pushing through the burn. That could really provide some cool photo opportunities. So, buoyed by Justin's words, I decided to go. So, after a week of meetings in Denver, the Bay Area, and Sacramento, I was ready for a couple of days on my own before Winterail. Before looking at this trip, though, let's look at how the traffic has changed in the canyon since my first visit. All of those short sidings on the former Western Pacific are anathema to the enormous trains of precision scheduled railroading. Union Pacific treats the WP as a one-way railroad now for heavy westward trains that don't need to fit in any of the sidings. Unit trains run as needed. There are 3 regulars, an intermodal from North Platte, Nebraska to Oakland, and then 2 manifests, one from North Platte and another from Green River, Utah, both going to the big classification yard in Roseville, California. The photograph shows a very small slice of one of those North Platte to Roseville trains. This is the middle of a 13,000-foot train with 5 locomotives running 2 by 2 by 1 on 206 cars. UP also loads trains of gypsum at Empire, Nevada. Those are short enough to fit the sidings, and I think they run about once a week. And then UP still has a local based out of Portola to serve smaller online customers. The BNSF traffic is largely unchanged, 2 pairs of mixed rates coming on and off the High Line at Ketty, plus the occasional unit train. So driving into the canyon on a perfect spring morning, I made it to Rich Bar, where I picked up this grain train coming west. This area had been heavily burned, and just like Justin had said, there was this fascinating mosaic of trees that were dead, dying, and still healthy. Apolga appeared unscathed, and I was eager to put a drone to use in the canyon for the first time. Now, this was a case where flying down from the road was more effective than going up. At Poe, the spring greens were popping, and the grainer slowed to meet a BNSF mixed freight coming east, which I followed back up the canyon. Still looking for something different, at Rock Creek, I went low with my fisheye lens as the train crossed the trestle. It had to meet a military train coming west at Paxton, another place where I put the drone to good use. And then the military train met a second BNSF freight further down the canyon, and that train is seen here at that favorite spot of mine, about to enter Tunnel 25, just above Rich Bar. I set the drone up there too for this aerial perspective. This train met yet another Union Pacific westbound at Virgilia, but I kept following this one. The late afternoon sunlight was perfect in seemingly every location. Now, this is a little girder bridge just above Paxton. And here's the aerial view from the drone. And after a quick crew change at Ketty, it headed up onto the High Line in the very last light of the day, hitting the trestle at Indian Falls just minutes before the shadows claimed the scene. And again, here's the paired perspective with the drone, and you can see most of the trees here had burned. This made 5 trains that afternoon, and once again, I could hardly believe my luck. I slowly upgraded my Feather River accommodation since I slept in the car on that first trip, and I celebrated this day over spaghetti dinner at this little cabin I was staying at in Paxton, which thankfully, and just barely, had been spared from the fire. A great benefit to these cabins is that the tracks are just up the hillside. So I was well positioned to give chase the next morning when a BNSF train came down the canyon at dawn. Now, this is a drone shot near Belden and a guardrail shot down between Polga and Poe, where I let this train go. I headed back up the canyon, hoping to find more trains, but I finally had the kind of slow day I'd been expecting. It would be 8 hours before the next train ran. But that gave me some time to appreciate the massive and ongoing road work in the canyon due to the fire. This was one of many one-lane stretches of Highway 70 with temporary traffic lights and pilot vehicles. You can see the recent logging of burned trees on the hillside left there. Back at Ketty, the drone offered new perspectives on the Y. I just needed a train. I was hoping for another one on the High Line, but what I finally got was a Union Pacific westbound. With no other prospects, I followed it most of the way back to Polga. And the sun even made a timely appearance at Rich Bar for this ultra-wide shot at Tunnel 25. There was one more train right at dusk, one of those unit trains of gypsum from Empire, Nevada, and those white piles make a rather striking sight in the open gondolas. I had one more night in my cabin, and then 2 trains the next morning, a pair of westbounds at dawn. This is the first of them, another of those massive North Platte to Roseville trains. And then a BNSF mixed freight not far behind it, seen here in the Serpentine Canyon between Virgilia and Rich Bar. I wish I could say I climbed up here, but this time I let the drone do it for me. And because I didn't have to climb back down, I had time to catch this train again at Rich Bar in a scene that, to me, really best captures the canyon in the aftermath of the fire. I sent the drone up once more for the day's first sunlight at Elephant Butte, and then I turned around and started heading north. The fire had been bad, but the rebuilding efforts were impressive. Even in Greenville, I found new pumps at the gas station and a temporary office, plus a portable coffee shop in the parking lot. I was glad I'd still gone, and I talked up the trip so much at Winterail that I convinced Elron to join me the following year. By then, though, the canyon had new problems. The trees' roots help hold the soil in place on the steep walls, and where the trees had burned, their roots had died and become weak. The winter of 2022 had been a relatively mild one in the canyon, but the rains returned with a vengeance in 2023. Without strong roots to hold them, the canyon walls came tumbling down in mud and rock slides. Highway 70 would be closed for months. This cut off almost all access to the canyon, but Elrond and I decided to still go. The railroad was opened, and we could still get to Ketty and everything east of there. But on the drive up from Sacramento, we got a flat tire on our rental car that would be emblematic of our luck for this trip. Now, the only real break we caught was a military train coming west at Reno Junction in nice evening light, not long after we finally made it up there. Here it is passing the ranch near Hawley, with the broad Sierra Valley stretching out to the south under its blanket of white. With all the snow and the cool mountain air, it was sometimes hard to think there'd ever been such a massive fire so nearby. The next morning at Ketty was spectacular, but of course there were no trains. At Quincy Junction, we found Sierra Pacific lumber loads on the interchange tracks, and neither of us had shot the Quincy Railroad, and we both hoped to catch them. They would make a run later this day, but by then we'd gone back to Ketty and missed it. That was just our luck for most of this trip. In the afternoon, we found a double grain train arriving at Portola. This is along the middle fork of Feather River, just east of town. We hoped for a quick crew change and were even happier when we heard a mixed freight leaving town ahead of this one. We quickly got ahead of it, and I sent the drone out for a shot along the middle fork near Sloat. Back at Quincy, we caught it on the trestle above the Quincy Railroad tracks, and then we headed for Ketty to what we thought would be the classic afternoon shot there. Instead, inexplicably, this train stopped a mile short of the Y, and all we could do was watch the sun go down. And there were no trains the next morning before we had to head north. Through it all, Elle was a great sport, and we even managed to have a pretty good time. We were both amused to find the intersection of Railway Avenue and Lawrence Street in downtown Quincy. I'd never been east of Portola before, and I was glad for the chance to explore a little more of the WP. But I still feel bad for dragging Elle up there for what remains by far my least productive trip. But I am nothing if not persistent, which is really just a nice way of saying stubborn. So I was back, alone this time, in March of 24. Highway 70 was once again closed, but on this particular Monday, the Quincy was busy, and I finally caught them running for the first time. To handle the interchange traffic, Union Pacific sends its local out of Portola twice a week, typically on Tuesdays and Fridays. They'd left 12 empty center beams at the junction on Friday, and here's Quincy number 5, an SW 1200 built in 1963, bringing them down from the junction to the mill. They can only handle 4 loaded cars going back at a time, and after lunch they took 2 cuts up to the junction. This is the first one passing horses as it departs Quincy. And here's the second approaching the junction. You can see the empties in the background at right, staged at a siding just outside of the mill. Even at 5 miles an hour, a pan shot can still make them look like they're flying. After dragging the second cut up the 3% grade to the junction, conductor Chris lines the switch for the shove. And a load-level drone flight was handy here too, to get just enough elevation to show the scene. The UP main line is along the hillside in the back, and the track in the foreground is the Quincy's steep grade down to the mill. After this, they were done for the day, so I headed east, and caught a mixed freight coming west at Reno Junction under some big storm clouds. The next morning, I caught the INPOA at Williams Loop, where the drone again came in handy. Conditions were tough, with some old snow clinging to the shady spots, but this straight down view of the train passing over itself was kind of interesting, especially with all those colorful containers. The local came along right behind the intermodal train, its single SD59M running Longhood forward for the westward trip. They dropped off their 12 empty cars at the junction and picked up 16 loads, 8 that the Quincy had brought up the day before and 8 more they'd brought up that morning. The interchange tracks only hold 12 cars, so the Quincy crew had waited there with the last 4. That made for the biggest train I could hope to see going back, with the engine facing the right way and the weather improving. I decided to stake them out at the Clio Trestle for what I hoped would be a good shot there. I found a hilltop view over at least some of the trees and dramatic afternoon light as a storm swept across the next ridge. And I also found trains I hadn't expected, a pair of westbounds leaving Portola, starting with this unit grain train. And behind it was a massive 200-car manifest where I sent the drone out to see more of the trestle. But the local had taken the siding at Blairsden for both of these trains, and that led to some drama. Their conductor had taxied up from Reno early that morning, and they'd been on duty since 0430, leaving them with just 45 minutes to work after these 2 westbounds had cleared. The dispatcher offered to call a taxi, meaning I'd missed my shot of them on the bridge here, but they decided that they could make it back to Portola. When they came charging across the trestle 10 minutes later, I wanted to cheer. They tied up in Portola at 4:29 p.m. with exactly 1 minute of time left to work. I went back again this March, and after 2 years of extraordinary work, Highway 70 was open again through the canyon. Just a single stretch of one-way traffic remained at a troublesome spot at Elephant Butte. Locals and visitors alike seemed to enjoy decorating the road sign there. My luck was the antithesis of the 2023 trip. I caught the Quincy running on 2 different days, this time with their number 12, an SW7 built in March of 1950, making it 75 years old that very month. A pan portrait was the best way I knew to commemorate the occasion. Here they're racing back to the mill after taking 4 loads up to the junction at a blistering 5 miles an hour in a 1/8 of a second telephoto shot that somehow came out sharp. The main line, while never busy, was steady enough that I rarely had to wait long for the next train. On that first afternoon, in between the Quincy runs, I got a drone shot at Ketty that I'd been trying to perfect for 3 years. A big BNSF southbound came down off the High Line, fully wrapping the 10-degree horseshoe curve along Spanish Creek and nice even light without any harsh shadows in this wide scene. Early the next morning, UP ran 2 westbounds down the canyon. This is the first of them at Rock Creek. And then I used the drone to catch the second on the North Fork Bridge, the most significant spot in the canyon I had yet to photograph. From daybreak until mid-afternoon of this day, the sun was out for just 15 minutes, and they happened to coincide with this shot. I was actually able to relax a little for the rest of the trip and savor some of these moments, like this perfect reflection at the honeymoon tunnels. BNSF sent a train up the canyon one evening, and after getting 2 shots in the sunset glow that I was pretty happy with, this one at the honeymoon tunnels, and this one at my favorite spot above Rich Bar, I got ahead of this train again, found a pullout with a clear view, and parked. I left the cameras in the car, stood by the river, and just watched. As the train approached, I waved, and the engineer replied with an air horn salute. I waited as the cars passed in their steady march up the grade, lingering until all I could hear was the river's timeless roar. The Feather River Canyon is a singular place, and for me it has also come to represent so much of the West, at least those parts of the West where railroads run. The canyon is really many canyons, with different streams running through an endless variety of rock. The formations here below Pulga look nothing like the massive slabs of granite up around Elephant Butte, and those look nothing like the serpentine rock up above Rich Bar. Running through all that rock is the water, and its story is everywhere, from its life-giving power to its destructive force. Our efforts to harness it have left another complete system on the landscape, one made up of dams and turbines, penstocks and powerhouses. There's much a part of the canyon today as the trains, maybe even more so. They wield their own powers of mystery and fascination. With the water, there is fire and the scars that both can leave behind. This is a BNSF train heading north up the High Line, climbing through the horseshoe curve in the heavily burned country between Greenville and Almanor. This is a shot specific to its time and place, while this one, just a few miles away, gets at a more universal appeal. The pine-scented meadows in the Feather River's high country could be mountain meadows almost anywhere in the West. Beyond their rain shadow lies the desert in all its infinite sameness and variety. Even unseen, just knowing it's out there adds to the allure. There are log trucks and gold mines, cabins straight out of 1960s vacation postcards, and diners where the breakfast will leave you stuffed until supper time. And there are traces of the New West, too, like craft breweries where rock climbers and elk hunters sidle up to the same bar. Both of the big Western railroads are here, at least as they now exist, along with traces of their history, like the Western Pacific lettering still cast in this concrete overpass. There's that independent short line, too, still hauling one of the region's signature products. Operations like this one used to be all over the West, but they've become rare enough today that any place that still has one is special. The canyon still has that famous 1% grade, but north of Keddy, the High Line is a real mountain railroad, with plenty of reminders of its challenges and dangers, like this broken knuckle by the 2.2% grade along Highway 89. The trains in the canyon are few enough to be precious, but still frequent enough that there's always a chance for a headlight on the horizon. And always hope for a moment of pure serendipity. It's all part of what's kept me coming back. I love the canyon for what's special about it alone, and I also love it for how it's tied to all of the West, from the real to the mythic. You can drive past the general store in Belden and imagine arriving there on the Feather River Express, and also imagine arriving at 1,000 different towns on 100 different trains. In the Feather River Canyon, I can look for the allure of railroads in all of the West, a search that started with the cutout page of a calendar 40 years ago. Thank you so much for the chance to share some of my photography with you today. It's always a real pleasure.
Wow, well, that was pretty cool, folks, right? Thank you, Scott. That was a great program.
Right.
I'm going to switch it back to a gallery view. I just thought it was outstanding. I mean, it's just so interesting. I see a lot of applause in the audience. Do we have any questions or comments for our presenter today? Thanks everybody for being here, by the way. So
That was tremendous, Scott. I'm going to throw away my camera.
Thanks, Bon. Thanks so much for tuning in this afternoon, too.
yeah. I
But
look
please,
at that.
let's not let any cameras be harmed due to the production of this program.
Yeah,
it's a special place, and I've been fortunate to get to see it a lot, and so grateful for the chances that my work at the center has provided by getting me close so many times.
just outstanding. And Elron, so you were there, you were the bad luck on that trip, right?
I was the official bad luck charm.
Oh, now have you been up there yourself since?
I have not. In fact,
I scared him away forever.
Oh,
Yeah, he scared me away. No, he hasn't. He hasn't. Although I told him, now I have my own Bronco, and it's like next time we go up, we're taking the Bronco, no rental cars.
Well,
So
that was by far the worst rental car I got too. Was this little Honda Civic, which that doesn't bother me, but it had the little tiny thin tires on it. That was just not what you needed for that part of the world.
no.
yeah,
But
changing
that was still a great
tires on
trip.
rental cars is never fun.
No,
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 they're
it's
not.
not.
But it was still a great trip. It
It
was.
was.
That was my first time back since, oh my gosh, probably around 2008, 2009. So it had been quite a long time. So it was really nice to get back.
No, there's something special about the way the pine smells up there above 4,000 feet or so.
Hmm
Oh yeah, beautiful. I've been up there a couple times, but like some of the other people said, I don't get pictures like that. So, but it's just nice to be up there. It's such a beautiful
Oh,
place, and you get a few trains, and it's just
hmm
a fun place to spend time.
yeah, no, it
hmm
really is.
Yeah.
Hey,
Great.
Scott, is the station still at Ketty, or is it gone?
No, there's really, I mean, it's kind of sad how little is left of some of the traditional railroad infrastructure up there. I mean, it was exciting to see the water tower in Victor's photograph. I mean, just, traces of the railroad landscape like that are just so few and far between at this point.
Right.
Yeah, the WP stations up there were painted a very interesting aqua green color.
Yeah. When
Oh
I
yeah.
saw Peter Moss joined us too, and I know Peter has a great painting in his collection of the station. I think that's the station at Belden, if I recall correctly, where they're hooping up orders to a train in the 40s with, I think it's one of WP's big 2882s.
Wow.
I see William Gill join us. William, you get any ideas for flash shots in the Feather River Canyon?
I feel like I'm just following you around. I've been dreaming about taking the flashes to the stacked over bridges forever, and I don't think the trick I pulled in the desert would work using the little speed lights. I'd have to bring the big guys. I'd have to drive or
I
ship
think you would need
everything.
the big guns there, but at least there is road access as long as
Yeah.
70s opened.
That's true.
And hearing that you climbed down, I was sitting there. I was like, "Ooh, maybe it is possible." Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't try that on these most recent trips, but it was, I was younger then, but it wasn't too bad of a hike.
Younger than I like that comment. Yeah.
We were all younger then, weren't we?
Yeah, we were. Yeah. So, no, what a great way to start out our fall program with just such an outstanding presentation. I mean, I turned my audio off because I was gasping at about every other photograph, going, "Wow, I can't believe it." And then I see another one, and I go, "That's even better." So that's outstanding. That's outstanding. We've got a great program coming up this fall. And while I've got a minute as your host and moderator, I do want a special hello. Let's see, is he still did he tunnel out on me? I was going to say hi to Paul Dedelius quick, and he may have left. Paul, oh, there he is. Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Hey, Paul's my new best friend in the whole world.
Oh boy.
Well, I mean, not everybody would over the phone say, "Yeah, I'll fix your locomotive for you." And we have Milwaukee Road 5057 at Paul's shop at the Port of Benton, and we're very grateful for our partnership working on the cosmetic restoration of that unit. So I just wanted to give you a shout out and a thank you for that. It's a great
Glad to have it. We've got a great team.
You've got a great team and very exciting. And after 12 years of sitting in the woods, we're finally making progress. So that's very exciting news. So thank you, Paul, just while you're there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anybody else got anything more? Otherwise, we're going to move for adjournment. And in 2 weeks, we'll be back with Trent Stetz doing an overview of railroads on the Big Island, right, Trent? The Big Island, he says. I will make a note to update my records accordingly. Scott, thank you. Thanks everybody in our audience today for just a wonderful program. And I look forward to seeing everybody in a couple of weeks for our next program. And Scott, I'll get you the link for today's program later this afternoon when we get it up online. So until then, everybody, thank you very much. And thanks for joining in on today's program. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody in 2 weeks. Scott, thanks again. Always good to have you. And
thanks so much for having me. And thanks everyone for tuning in. It's always
just a great program. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to say bye for now and
Thanks.
end the recording.